What is the worst thing you have done to have? Story 1. I once had a buddy that clearly was in love with me. She was overly attached and was getting very fussy, so I suddenly chose to ignore all her phone calls and SMS to get rid of her. She clearly was upset, as I could understand from her last SMS, which told me what a douchebag I was, etc. A few months passed by with no contact, and one time while being drunk I wanted to get laid. I messaged this girl and asked her to come over. She then asked me what the I wanted and why I had been ignoring her. I then told her, out of pure horny, that my dad died when I broke contact with her, and the reason to the ignore was because I was in a deep depression and could not talk to anyone. She came right over and I fucked the out of her. After that one time I went to ignore again, never spoke to her since. I feel bad. TLDR. In some way I said that my dad died to get laid. My dad is alive. Story 2. I've never done anything terrible or manipulative, but when I was 16 I did use a cheesy pickup line that actually worked. It was awful, but DMHS. I was out with a friend I had a crush on, and apparently she had felt the same way. But we're awkward teenagers and not sure how to handle it. Cloudy night, and she was grumbling about how the night sky was ugly. I told her, "It looks like this because all the stars ended up in your eyes." And it was on. Story 3. My buddy of 6 months one day said she didn't just want to be a buddy and wanted more. Told her she was now my girlfriend just to shut her up and get it in. We're now married and have a kid. Edit. Decided to post a pic for fun and from the lengthy discussion below. Story 4. A guy I knew from college took a girl on a late dinner date. She parked her car at his house and he drove to dinner. While at dinner, he called and had her car towed so that she was forced to spend the night. Stay classy. Story 5. One time, when I was 19, I lied that my entire immediate family died in a car accident so a girl would feel sorry for me. I was at the local gym in a hot tub just feeling sorry for myself. I was actually crying because I had just been fired for stealing. The worst part was that it fucking worked. I used to be a pathetic excuse for a human being. Story 6. Called my ex a month after we broke up and convinced her we never had breakup, and that we wouldn't find closure if we didn't one last time. She saw it as a chance for us to get back together, and let's just say it didn't turn out well. I hate myself sometimes. Story 7. Girl here. Made an OkCupid account on the pretext of going on dates. I'd get about 25 to 50 unique hits and 10-20 messages per day depending on how active I was. I'd pick a guy, or more, each week and set up a date. I'd give him my Google Voice number for texting. Regardless of how much I protested that I'd prefer going 50-50, about 90% of the time the guy would insist on paying for dinner and drinks. It could get really pricey, depending on where he wanted to go. These guys were into woo a partner. They sometimes wanted to go to really nice restaurants. Afterwards, we'd end up at his place. Never mind. Get it on. I'd leave the next morning after agreeing to future dates and whatnot. I'd block him on OKC so I wouldn't get any messages and delete the contents of my Google Voice every month or so. It was a pretty depressing place. Probably especially so because I am in an extremely male-dominated field, so I'd get set up with lonely engineer physics types. The majority of guys that I met on that site really were looking for love, and I took advantage of them. I stopped when I had an epiphany and realized that I was lucky I hadn't ended up dead in a ditch somewhere or riddled with STDs. I test clean and have been in a monogamous relationship for the past 6 months or so. We didn't meet on OKC. He doesn't know I did that. Edit. Some people wonder if it would not be more obvious to say I want a one-night stand up front. A very good point. As a woman, it is frequently more difficult for me to and culturally ends when the man ejaculates. A one-night stand is more likely to roll over and pass out when he comes, whereas a guy hoping for emotional involvement is going to do his damnedest to get me to. A second note, if I may, is to say that the reason I did not formally inform them of my decision to immediately discontinue communication is due to verbal abuse, threats of physical violence, and the begging, pleading that I'd get as a response. Because I didn't feel like it. Story 8. Sleep with someone who I didn't find attractive or nice at all. She was into me, and I just wanted to have again, and she was an easy option. Edit. Seems like a lot of guys suffer from non-masturbatable rest pressure and are ready to anything within reach. Story 9. Became the supportive BFF of a girl in my Spanish class in college, knowing that her boyfriend was going to be shipping out with the military a few weeks later. The night he left, we hung out, got drunk on tequila shots. My idea. I played on her emotions to get her into bed. Her name was Jennifer, and I regret it. Story 10. Called my ex, at the time, if he didn't come to my house. He can't stand that word. It was 3 a.m. I knew he'd have just to prove he's not a. He's a. Story 11. I invited a guy I was dating over to watch a movie, even though I knew the file was corrupted and the movie wouldn't play properly. So you'd think we had? No, because the guy was a motherfucking engineer, and he proceeded to download and install the latest version of VLC player, then a good version of the movie, until he got everything right. We watched the movie, then he went home. Fuck. Story 12. Drunkenly cheated on a really great woman who was very much in love with me, and I with her, who would be devastated if she found out, which she later did, ruining a great relationship for both of us. Totally random and pointless drunken stupidity, and one of the worst things I've ever done. Aside from family, I don't think anyone has ever loved, cared about, and trusted me as much as her before or since, and I hurt and betrayed her worse than I have ever any other person. For nothing. I still remember the look on her face and the way she broke down when I told her. Almost 2 years later, I regret it almost daily. Story 13. My friend, who was visiting from New Zealand, and I met two girls in Chicago at a late-night bar. I faked a New Zealand accent and we pretended to be cousins. Girls loved it. We went our separate ways that night and I continued the accent into the morning. Edit. I should add that the next day my friend was laughing at how bad my accent was and how it sounded Australian. Also, at one point, the girls started to catch on and asked, "You guys sound a little different." My buddy made the save and said he was from the coast and I was from the inland. Never questioned it again. Edit 2. Just so this is not left as a cliffhanger, we talked for like 10 minutes in the morning. Then I left like a bat out of. Never saw or talked to her again. No regrets. Story 14. Went to a bar with my buddy, trying to break a dry spell. I start chatting with this girl and bought her a drink. Yada yada yada. She's into me and lives a few blocks always, but she's with her not-so-attractive, slightly plus-sized friend that is trying to break a dry spell as well. So, basically this chick is telling me that if I want her, my buddy has to hook up with her friend. So, it's 10 minutes of me begging my buddy to take one for the team and offering him whatever I can. Like a true bro, he eventually agrees. We go back to their place, get to sexy time, and eventually make our way home. My buddy says it was the worst he ever had, and the worst part was her large Mickey Mouse tattoo on her stomach. As he was pounding her, the fat-filled tissue with the mug of his favorite childhood Disney character was jiggling around like a jello mold. I've owed him many a favors since that night. DM, HS. TLDR. I begged my buddy to knock a 5 and have the worst ever so that I could end my dry spell. Edit. Spelling. No involved. Story 15. My best friend was dating this psychopath who cheated on her multiple times before she dumped him. A few weeks later, he kept trying to get back with her. She turned him down every time. So instead, he asked if they could have one last night of passion, exact words, together to get over her, and he would leave her alone. She jokingly told him, "Yeah, if you tattoo my name on your..." He did. Showed her the next day. Did he get his night of passion? No. Story 16. Not but anyways, I was at the courthouse with my ex getting the divorce finalized. I picked her up so we go for lunch as the court had lunch break and we're in the car talking, and I start sweet-talking her saying you never know 10 years down the road, blah blah. She leans over, starts full out. Making out with me, it led to me going down on her in the car, and a fantastic BJ where she got on her fancy blouse and pants, only to have to go back in the courthouse to sign the papers to end it all. I wish I could say I felt bad, but I have no soul and she put me through. Story 17. Throwaway. So I had a fairly long relationship with a girl, about a year or more. Lots of ups and downs, eventually I got cheated on. We broke up, but she kept trying to keep in contact. Got back together. Yes, it was a mistake. Then I learned about other cheating that happened before and broke it off again. So then she keeps trying to keep in contact, annoying me, showing up uninvited to parties. She's also managed to get in good with people I know. But anyway, by this time, I've been single for a while and was out drinking. She was not of drinking age. Being drunk, dumb, and horny, I texted her that I missed her. She shows up at the bar I assume because she asked one of my friends where I was. So end up at my friend's house, go up to his video game room and proceed to put it in her butt. Next day, she got all clingy, had breakfast with her, and dropped her off at her place and then proceeded to ignore her, except for telling her that I'm not interested in anything else happening. I felt a little bad, but I got closure. Revenge, whatever you want to call it. TLDR. Called up an ex who cheated on me so that I could put it in her butt. Story 18. In my first relationship, we decided to get a little adventurous one weekend when I was home from college. We rented a hotel room, I tied up my GF, blindfolded her, walked across the street to a Wendy's, bought dinner, came back, and fingered her while feeding her a Frosty. It was the most awkward experience of my life. But damn it, she loved it. Story 19. I used to hook up with a girl and then, for some reason, that ended. She told all her friends not to hook up with Party Pooper Party, but they only knew my name. Had no idea who I actually was. One night, a bunch of her friends were over and hanging out, and this one girl was pretty into me. All of a sudden, she said, "Wait, you aren't Party Pooper Party, are you?" I said, "No, that's my roommate. My name is Bob." So the whole time she was bitching at my roommate for being into her friend while she was all over me. We then had, and right after I finished, I said, "My name isn't Bob, it's Party Pooper Party." And I kicked her out of my bed and made her go home. Story 20. Senior year of high school, one of my buddies starts talking to this sophomore chick and asks how much money he would have to pay her to give him a. She says, "I don't know, like $20? To which my friend responds, "What about 15s?" At this point, my buddy proceeds to talk her down to $5, $3 up front, and the other two if it's good. He only gave her $3. Story 21. Some guy at a party was telling everyone that I was giving out ecstasy, was cyclobenzaprine. So this girl comes up and asks if she can have a pill. I glad oblige, and she grabs my hand and drags me to the beer pong table, and after about 20 minutes, she said she felt it kick in and dragged me off into the wild pink yonder. She also ended up sucking my buddy off in her car. So, there's that. Story 22. I remember someone else on Reddit once said they put nicotine patches on their girlfriend while they had, in order to get her addicted to them. Can't remember what thread it was, but I'm pretty sure it was an AskReddit thing. But IMO that takes the cake. Story 23 used a Bible verse to convince a girl to swallow. Edit for more info. Genesis 38:9. And Onan knew that the offspring would not be his. So it came about that when he went into his brother's wife, he wasted his seed on the ground in order not to give offspring to his brother. I was hanging out with a somewhat religious lady friend, the type of girl that would give me a BJ, but then inform you she was saving her virginity for marriage. On one such occasion, I requested her to do such a favor, saving on cleanup. She declined, which I informed her was a sin. Jesus ho. How? Praise the Lord. Genesis 38:9. If it's not in you, it will eventually touch the ground. That's a sin. Jesus ho. Whoa, oh my gosh, does it taste bad? Praise the Lord. Guess we'll find out. If it matters, she was blonde. Story 24. I don't regret this. I was fooling around with a girl and she had to leave for work soon. She got up to check the time on my computer and said we had enough time. My screensaver freezes the image when it turns on, so it was actually 20 minutes later. We finished, she got up and checked an accurate clock in confusion. I played dumb. Doesn't matter had edit. It was the Bubbles one. Story 25. Yeah, we can definitely go out on a date soon. Yeah, I'll give you a lift home in the morning. Yeah, I have loads of booze back in the flat. I'm not that type of guy. I'll definitely text you. Story 26 went to a club with a friend. Trolled the club for Simone to have with. Left my friend standing in the club while I left to have with the girl. Fucked her. Came back to the club and picked up my friend to head home for the evening. I didn't even make an effort to get to know her, and she wasn't what I call hot. Story 27. There was this girl who was pretty into me, but I wasn't really into her. I acted like I was interested in her to get into her pants. That's pretty bad to begin with, but it gets a little worse. So this girl is really into anime ambition and looking dudes, and I guess I fit the build. I'm pretty slender and have long hair for a guy. As a side effect of her liking this kind of guy, she's also into guys cross-dressing. Anyway, I had been sleeping with her for a while, and I really wanted an E, so we were kind of hanging out and I mentioned that I wanted one, and she said that she didn't like giving them. I asked what I could possibly do to get one, and she told me that she always wanted to dress a guy up like a girl. So I let her. Shaved my body hair, wore a dress and everything. Turns out people who don't like giving blowjobs aren't good at giving them. 310 would not cross-dress again. Story 28. Didn't tell a guy I was dating that I was moving away from the area in a month. He was cute, and that was good, and I was worried he wouldn't want to keep hooking up if he knew there was an expiration date. Story 29. I don't regret it, but the stories here did make me remember this. I was sleeping with an ex who still loved me. I'd often give her a booty call when I was horny, and she rarely refused me. I'd left it a while and called her somewhat out of the blue, and it took some serious persuading to get her to agree to some fun times. It was during these fun times that we ended up in a 69. Things were going really well, and she had quite the... After which, to my surprise, she got up off of me, handed me a roll of toilet paper from the side, said, "Finish yourself off," and left. Needless to say, I did. I've respected that woman incredibly ever since. Story 30 told her I loved her. At the time, I was young and dumb, and we'd only been seeing each other for about 2 weeks, and I had an empty house. She was all, "I only want to have with a man who loves me," to which I stupidly replied, "And I do love you." 6 months of a relationship and one very nasty breakup later, I realized never to say that just to get a lady into bed. Some take it seriously. Story 31. I was at a friend's house, convinced a girl to come have with me in the bed of a girl she didn't like, who was a roommate there. The other girl was not there at the time, obviously. One of the hottest experiences of my life. No regrets on that one. Story 32. I went home with a girl and she fell asleep. Her roommate woke up and asked who I was. Asked if we could watch a movie. She started blowing me. First girl woke up and saw it. Her roommate felt bad about finishing the there, so we left their room and finished. Edit. Missed a line. Story 33. Okay, you need to understand that he was gorgeous. And I was, who am I kidding, AM easy. But he didn't know he was gorgeous, and he also was one of those sensitive guys. So he was a virgin and wanted to save it for a girl he loved. I told him I was a virgin and that I loved him. We had fantastic gorgeous. I was not a virgin. I did not love him. I feel bad. Story 34. Pretended I broke her vibrator. We went to grab it, we were already going to have, and the oscillating part wouldn't work. Rabbit vibrator. So she was like, "Aw, how cute you broke it because you don't want anything else to pleasure me." At this point, I had 2 options. After that, whenever I mentioned that I would smash a vibrator to have her to myself in a joking tone, it was the perfect mood setter. Don't ask me how or why. I'm still not sure what she thinks. Best part is I didn't touch the thing. It just decided to stop working, and she was conveniently turned on by the fact that I might get jealous of a toy. Story 35. I broke up with an overly attached girlfriend and spent a few hours consoling her as she cried hysterically. Then had the patience to deal with constant depressing status updates from her. The drunken texts and calls from her describing her undying love and how we're soulmates and I'll come around eventually, how true love never dies. It was all very weird and scary and took an inhuman amount of patience on my part to deal with. But eventually, I helped her get over it and move on peacefully, without being a... Fast forward a month, and I randomly run into her at bar as she's celebrating her birthday with the guy I set her up with after me. Totally took her home that night and had wild. Also accepting the morning and breakfast she cooked for me. Listening to her talk about how she always knew I'd come around before bolting, as she took a shower and never speaking to her again. I hate myself sometimes. Story 36. Not particularly shameful, but definitely the lamest. Wrote a note that said, "Wanna bang? Yes, smile, no, backflip." We've been dating for 5 months, so I guess it worked pretty well. Story 37. All right, throw away for this. I had stopped talking to an ex-girlfriend after an extended drama-filled period that resulted in a suicide attempt on her part. We stopped talking for about a year when I got a message out of the blue. I decided to be courteous as she loved out of town. About a week later, she told me she would be coming to my town to visit friends and asked if I wanted to get coffee. I hesitantly agreed. We met up at a local coffee shop, but it was late and they closed, so we just kind of hung out in some random parking lot. While we were there, she proceeded to tell me about how she hooked up with a guy and ended up getting pregnant. The guy wanted nothing to do with it, and she didn't want to keep it. So she had an abortion. She started crying. So I hugged her to console her. I still found her pretty attractive, so I figured why not? 5 minutes later, I'm deep. 10 minutes later, I realize I am the worst kind of person. Tell.dar. Ex-girlfriend had an abortion. Console her with my whiner. Story 38. I shoved the hilt of a K-bar, combat knife, in my to try and impress a girl. The whole hilt. On film. I still have the film too. I recorded it over Batman Returns on VHS. Story 39. Pretending that he was a nice and interesting person when in fact I couldn't fucking stand him. I just wanted some, but he wanted a girlfriend and got really clingy. I knew I shouldn't have slept with him, but I was horny. I felt kind of bad though, when I finally just started ignoring him and stopped taking his calls and he sent me the most cringeworthy letter I've ever read. I wish I still had it. He even spelled my name wrong. Story 40. My friend let a girl, who is smoking hot like an easy 9, put a silk blanket in his during, and told him to tell her when he was coming. He did, and she pulled it out and he himself all over the bed. I swear to God this is true. She admits to it openly as well. Story 41. It's been over 5 years, so I'll tell this story. When I was 21, I was driving back from a show, and a girl ran a four-way stop sign and T-boned my car. When she got out, it was obvious that though she wasn't incoherently drunk, she probably wouldn't pass a breathalyzer. She was bawling inconsolably and asked if there was anything she could do so I wouldn't call the cops. I told her she could buy me a drink. She drove to a nearby bar. This was downtown, so this meant 4 or 5 blocks. Though she probably shouldn't have done even that. While I called the cops and reported a hit and run, we drank a few martinis and it went. Okay. TL doctor filed a false police report to get laid. Story 42. Once in London, I made an appointment via Craigslist without seeing a pic of the other person. I was so horny that I didn't notice that it had a not signature. How surprised I was when I arrived and a Filipino guy was waiting for me. Edit. I didn't have with him, just the fact that I was so horny that I fell for a gay ad. Story 43. It was my junior prom night in high school, and I went with my GF of 2 years. I was totally expecting to get laid no problem. Well, it became apparent that this wasn't going to happen by any conventional method because we got into a stupid argument, as all high school couples do. And we argued into the wee hours of the night about whatever it was. And after we made amends, I assume it's time for the makeup. Wrong. She was too tired and still a little pissed. She ends up going to sleep and I'm wide awake trying to decide on how I can get laid. I'm not sure how or why this worked, but hear me out. I stick her sleeping hand ever so carefully in my pants. Leave it in for a good 5 seconds, then get up as I'm getting ready to leave. Once she is awake, I forcefully remove her hand from my pants and say something along the lines of, "If you don't want me while we're awake, then you can't try having me while you're sleeping." And she wakes up astonished and turned on that she had grabbed me in her sleep. That's when all bets were off and we were at it like high school kids. TLDR she prom. Argument, hand, pants, niece. Story 44. A buddy and I know sign language, so we would go to bars and one of us would act deaf. We would pick out a pretty girl near the bar and the deaf one would stand at the bar. The bartender would ask what he wanted to drink and eventually get pissed off. In comes the other friend, signing to the deaf friend, asking what he wanted to drink. Consequence. Pretty girl thinks you are a good guy, taking care of a poor handicapped friend, and all you have to do is close. Story 45. I met a girl in town whilst out for drinks one night. I was very drunk. Gave her my number and she called me the following week and asked me over for. Couldn't remember what she looked like. When I got there, things were going great. We were getting to it when her 2-year-old son, I knew nothing about this kid being in the house, started screaming. As she was putting him back to bed, there was a terrible banging on the house window. Looked outside and apparently her baby's father had turned up wielding a machete. What was worse is that she had a direct panic alarm to the police station as he'd been violent in the past. Within minutes, the armed police turned up and a standoff ensued. After the guy was tasered and arrested, they wanted to interview me. I'd already given the girl a false name, which was awkward. Once they were done, I left without saying goodbye, thinking I'd get the out of there, even though no actual had taken place. Only to find my car blocked in by police vehicles and I had to go back in the house to ask them to move. Anyway, I went drinking the following weekend, bumped into the same girl and ended up back at her house again deep, which was probably the worst thing I could have done. Story 46. I was in high school. I was doing summer school due to the fact that I was a lazy when it came to homework. Girl that was in my math class caught a crush on me early on. Talked to her for a bit in class. Eventually, it led to her wanting to take things further. I wasn't for all of that at first, but I kept talking to her and eventually convinced her to come to my house. She was wearing a sundress, so I went to town with my mouth on her. But she stopped me short of home plate and literally said, We can't do that since you're not my boyfriend. Girl was a bit of a nerd, but I found her oddly attractive. Not to mention she was the only white girl in my school. I'm in the Bronx, I'm Hispanic, and white girls don't usually mingle with the boys from the hood here. She felt exotic for fuck's sake. So I went along with it. Not only did I fake being her boyfriend to get from her all summer, she was also doing my homework and let me cheat on the tests. Chick literally helped me pass summer school, which my dumb at the time would have likely failed. I dumped her as soon as school ended because it coincided with me meeting my high school sweetheart, who I ended up with for 6 years, immediately after. Still kind of feel bad about it, and she used to actively avoid me in school later on. Never got to thank Stephanie. Story 47. Pulled out a used tampon that was stuck inside of the girl for who knows how long because she couldn't reach it, and I really wanted to have. Oh god, the smell. Story 48. I don't actually regret this, but it was definitely a sneaky move. I've used sites like AFF in the past, and one woman let me use her account so I could see all the creepy messages she would get. One caught my eye. It was from a couple, and the woman handled the account. I message her with my profile saying, I'm in a couple too and that we're looking to swing. Weeks of chatting go by and I find out she has aspirations to be a model. I tell her I have worked as a photographer and that I can help her out, followed by the disclaimer that I sold my lights and accessories and only have my camera, a Sony Nex 5, not pro at all. She invites me out to a club to meet her and her husband. I get there and it's packed and loud, so we don't do a lot of talking. The husband asks about my GF, and I say she has to work the next day, so she stayed home. Bar closes and they invite me back to their place. They have a bottle of vodka, so we proceed to drink some more. She then starts getting into her outfits and I start photographing her. I even had her husband hold a cell phone up to her face as a key light. My camera's battery dies, and she leaves to her room to change out of her slutwear. When she comes back, she starts giving me a... I then look at her husband, and he's in full support of it. She then whips my out and starts going down on me in front of her husband. She then asks if I have a condom, to which I reply yes. I run to my car, grab some rubbers, and come back. Back inside, I see her sitting at the end of the couch and her husband pulled up a chair. I then start plowing her in front of her husband. TLDR. Pretended to be a photographer and railed an aspiring model in front of her husband. Story 49. I don't know if this counts, but it was something horrible I did for. Freshman year of college, I was in Cancun for spring break. My friends and I had spent the last 2 days drinking pretty hard, so we decided to take a day off. Our day off included drinking pretty heavily throughout the day, but instead of going out to a club that night, we decided we would go to a strip club. So night comes around and we continue to drink. We walk out of our hotel and hail cabs and ask the cab driver to find us a strip club. In case you don't know Cancun, there is pretty much a strip of hotel and clubs that make up the resort area. That area is where all the spring breakers are, and you are always warned not to leave that area. Well, after about 20 minutes in the cab, it became clear that we were leaving that area. I start seeing real Mexico for the first time. We get to the strip club and everyone gets a lap dance. The dances weren't great, but what can you expect in a Mexican strip club? We're all about to leave when my friends comes back, the group all excited, and says, for $10 each, we can each get a stripper in the to ourselves in a private area. To drunk me, that sounded like a great deal. Half of my group leaves and half stay. We go up to the private room, hang out with our strippers. After a while, my stripper informs me that I can her for $200. As drunk as I was, I knew that was a horrible deal. Cue 30 mins of negotiations until it gets down to $60 for something like 3 full songs. I don't know why I took it, but I think part of me felt that after getting the price down $140, I couldn't pass that up. So, drunk me had with a Mexican stripper in the middle of cartel country Mexico. Luckily, drunk me was smart enough to wear a condom. TLDR negotiated a Mexican stripper down from $200 to $60 for sex. Wore condom. Story 50. I was propositioned to kill a man once. Almost did it too. I was a virgin before I met her. Barely even had any pubes. I was immature and childish before she came into my life. I was codependent on my best friend for more years than I care to admit. He urged me to talk to her one day, so I did. Things progressed from there. Before I knew it, we were having sexual relations and doing laundry together. One night, during a casual conversation, she told me the only way we could be together was if her husband was murdered. She cried and made a convincing case. My emotions got the best of me, and I accepted the offer to bring us closer together. She handed me a handgun, and I vowed to cement our love by killing her husband. I walked out the door and had a moment of clarity. I disposed of the firearm in a nearby bush and ran home in shambles. I never saw her again. Story 51. I fucked my best friend that I knew was falling for me when I had a GF. As soon as I broke up with my GF, I turned my best friend into my buddy. Fucked around with her for a couple months. All the while she was ready to basically drop everything for me. She fell in love with me and would have married me if I asked. The entire time I had no feelings for her but just wanted to get my wet. Months of doing the dirty deed go on until I rekindle the flame with my ex. I ended up getting back with my ex and completely cutting off my old best friend. She hit me with the, "You can't have your cake and eat it too." Story 52. Pretended to be Christian as she was. I was around 17 and met a crazy yet hot chick. When I say crazy, I mean girl who thanks the Lord in bed for getting laid. Crazy. While making out, she started with her religious stuff. Fucked up religious stuff. But I still pretended to be as awesome of a Christian as she was. Even praised the Lord with her. And it worked for the night. She then continued to pray in bed while getting it on, afterwards giving thanks to the Lord, and singing Christian songs in my room in the morning. My innocent teenage mind was scarred. Story 53. When I was really young and stupid, I made out with a girl and told her that my girlfriend was okay with me fooling around. A couple days later, I told my serious girlfriend that I knew she wanted to mess around with other guys, and that I understood, and that we could have an open relationship. She thanked me and was so happy that I understood. The next weekend was amazing and awful at the same time. Story 54. So there's this fat chick who's 4 years older than me who I knew as a kid. Hadn't heard from her in years, honesty forgot she existed. One day around Christmas, she starts Facebooking me, then texting, and so on. So one day, I'm at my friend's house and she starts sending booty texts. I say something like, "I have plans with someone right now, but if you wanted to make plans with both of us." So we go pick her up, drive through the middle of nowhere and proceed to her for several hours. After all is said and done, neither me or my friend responded to her. TLDR. I got laid so easily everybody around me got laid.